excellent real estate attorney with us, Sergio Cavali, who does almost all of my transactions. So thank you, Sergio. Thank you so much for all your work. So we're gonna know more about what are the rules, like what does the attorney do in real estate, and how did you get started. So tell us, like, how did you get started to become an attorney?
When I started law school, I originally didn't plan on doing real estate. Originally, I wanted to do criminal work. And what happened was I graduated in 2002. And obviously, you know what happened, 2001. So that, when 9/11 happened, no one really left the DA's office, and that was the track that I was on. So my last semester, I took a real estate clinic at school, and I actually really liked it. And it's really one of the areas of law where, everybody can kind of win. Real estate transactions are not say adversarial. You have someone who wants to sell, and you have someone who wants to buy, and if everything goes the way it's supposed to, then everybody gets what they want,
And everybody is happy.
and everyone's happy. So, I kind of like that aspect of it. I also like, the client contact aspect of it. You get to meet a lot of different people. You get to know them. Sometimes you have clients, over the years, repeat clients. So I always like that sort of aspect of it.
Wow. So basically, you started in 2002?
2002. You made me feel old. Thank you.
Almost 20 years. Oh, yeah. I didn't know that. I was like, it's more than 20 years.
Yeah, I know. Thanks.
You're doing real estate for a long time. Okay, so like me and you, we always see the transaction like in buyers, sellers always panicking. So you're gonna talk more about like what are the actually the real estate attorney does. Like, can you tell us more about it? What do you when you represent a buyer, what do you do from when you represent a seller, what do you do, and what goes on behind all that title? If you could explain us,
Sure.
How does that work?
So, from the buyer perspective, so what happens is typically, in New York, the sales attorney will draft the contract. They'll send it to you. You'll review it. We always make changes, tweaks, depending on the circumstance. They're usually minor, sometimes they're major. We speak to the client to make sure of what the initial understanding is. So we'll send our changes over to the sales attorney. Once the sales attorney has approved the changes or made their comments on it, then we'll meet with the client, to go through the contract to make sure they understand the terms, understand what their rights are, what their responsibilities are. At that point, the client's okay, then, they'll sign the contract, we'll tender a down payment, and then we wait for seller to sign.
Yep, it's really important, attorneys explaining all the terms to the contract, because sometimes, people are busy, not everyone does it. I know you do it, but it's really important for the buyers, to know what they're getting into actually.
Right, that's correct. And especially for, first-time home buyers or people who are not familiar with the process,
Yep.
You really need to understand not only what your rights are, but what you're obligated to do. And there's a lot of deadlines and timeframes in the contract that need to be met. Buying a house is work. And it's not just you hire people and they do everything for you. You have to be an active participant.
Yeah.
And communications, in this industry is vital. Without good communication between client, attorney, real estate agent, lender, title, it lends itself to a poor result, whereas more communication always lends itself to a better result.
If communication is everything. Like, if I have a bad attorney, like, who I have to work with, I don't want to say bad attorney, like bad communication, I would say, it's really hard, because I had situations like that. I had to wait in front of the attorney's office to just get that contract signed, because nobody was picking up the phone.
Right. Yeah, I find that most clients, just like, even if it's a quick email or a text, just so they know, hey, you're working on it, you're doing something.
Yep.
And from an attorney's perspective, there are like a few times during the process where we're most involved, obviously at the contract.
Yeah.
And then typically, towards closing, going over numbers, making sure things are the way they're supposed to be. Now, there are times, depending on the deal, where we have to get involved more of a lender perspective. Maybe there's a, issue with the appraisal, or, a mortgage issue. But, sometimes there's always sort of, I don't want to call it a dead period, but a period where The lender is more forefront than we are, but lots of times you want to check in, hey, how's the loan process going? Are there any issues? What are we meeting our time frames? Do we need extensions?
Yeah.
So, even just that level, quick check in just to make sure everything is okay, lets the client know that, you're following up, you're on top of things, but also, it also encourages them to, hey, if there's an issue, reach out. Maybe we have a solution,
Yep.
or, maybe there's something we can do to address it. And then really once we get to closing, it's making sure that title's clear, going over numbers, making sure our numbers match the bank numbers, everything is what we expect. So what happens is when we schedule a closing, the sales attorney will typically send us their adjustments and their check requests. We'll go through it, and then we get the bank final numbers from the bank, and then we can calculate what you need for closing, make sure everything's sort of with like where we expected it, no surprises. And then, obviously to then have to tell the client, you need to bring this check, that sort of thing. And then that's kind of the overall sort of, grand picture of what you do on a purchaser side.
There's a
in a
lot
nutshell.
of work behind that, behind the scene. There's a lot
Yes.
of work, but numbers.
Yes,
all that.
and the problem is New York. Everything is sort of hurry up and wait. Especially like when we get to the end, because typically we don't get the bank attorney final numbers to the day before closing,
Yeah.
and we got to calculate all of them, make sure everything
Before
matches, and then we got to inform everybody of what to bring. So and sometimes depending on the bank, depending on the attorney, sometimes we get those things at like 9 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 6 o'clock at night, sometimes the morning of the closing. So sometimes there's a lot of scrambling around towards the end there.
Yeah, but what do you usually? Because person, when I work with you, you always know like, oh, today the deadline is mortgage contingency deadline is approaching. Like
Right.
you're top of that. I know you have a lot of deals going on. I don't know how you track all that. That's
So-
a lot to track.
What we do internally is we always have like a log, and of the deal, what's happened, what's the latest update, and we always have entries for when the mortgage contingency expires, when the closing date's supposed to be, do we have a survey, do we have the commitment, when's the rate expiring, because deadlines are important. You miss that mortgage contingency deadline and you don't get the loan, it's
You're
a
missing
disaster. You can't do that. So those are the things that you got to keep track of. And as an attorney, you never want to be, you never want to have your client in a position where they can lose money. If the deal doesn't go forward and they get their down payment back, they lost time. Maybe they expend a little bit of money on the inspection or whatever, but they can go buy something else. They're not ruined.
Yep.
Whereas, a lot of people, especially first-time home buyers, they're putting, money down that they've saved over the years.
Yep.
It's probably in some ways represents a lot of, a large portion of their savings.
Yep.
So you always have to be very cognizant of that.
To protect the money.
You got to protect the money. That's always goal one. We tell every buyer that's always our first goal. Buying the house is always goal number 2, but protecting the money is always goal number one.
Yep.
Yes.
And also from the seller side, we talk about the buyers. From the seller side, what the attorneys actually do.
Sure. So from the seller side, we prepare the contract. So it's important when you're preparing the contract to really understand what the terms are, what the understandings are, what the time frames are. Is the buyer getting a mortgage? How much is the mortgage they're getting? Are there any other contingencies? Maybe there's a tenant that needs to move out, or there's a title issue. The nice thing about New York City is that you can do a lot of research online. So what we'll do is we'll go on to what's called ACRIS, which is the city clerk website, and we'll check the deed. Is there maybe someone else on the deed that's not on the deal memo because maybe they passed away or someone forgot, oh yeah, I bought it with my husband, or whatever the case may be. We also like to look at the certificate of occupancy. We're representing that this is a 2-family. Is the CO say that it's a 2-family? Is there a discrepancy there? We can look up certain violations online. So in New York City, you have 4 types of violations. You have building, housing, sidewalk, and fire. We can look up building. We can look up housing. So we can, if there's a violation, sometimes the client's not aware of it, and you can give them notice so they can clear it up.
Yep.
Right. We actually had that situation yesterday. And because it takes time to clear these things, and you don't, the sooner you find out, the more time you have to deal with it.
Yeah, I love the way you do it. Like before sending out the contract, I see you always check the deed and see if there is any probate issues, then the title issues, so seller get the time to clearing up instead of finding it out after the title search, all that.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things you can't always find out until
The
you get the
fire
title
one and the
search,
side
you
one.
know, or
And something comes
other
up.
things. But the more prepared you are, the more research you do, usually, again, just like communication, it just leads to better result. Because there are a lot of situations where people aren't aware that there's a violation or an issue. Because, you know, sometimes violations on the house, they sit there for a long time, especially things like sidewalk violations. I closed the deal maybe a month or two ago where there was a sidewalk violation from 1990.
Yeah.
You know, who remembers what happened 33 years ago? And so a lot of times with those things, you get one notice, and if you don't happen to get it, they don't send you reminders. So things like that, you know, the sooner you can find those things out, the better.
Okay, so it's always seller. Most of the times, it's seller's duty unless you go in a cash deal, like it's disclosing upon. It's always seller duty to clear up on all the violation, because most of the buyers are concerned about thinking about, oh, if I get a house, they don't want any violation. Like they don't know the process that yes, attorney does a title search to make sure your attorney is working with you,
Right.
to see like how do you tell the buyers that.
Yeah. So basically, you know, even with buyers, we'll try and check online for what we can find online ahead of time, just so we can put everybody on notice. Because sometimes, you know, this like I said, seller's not aware, the seller's attorney's not aware, so we can say, hey, you have these issues, you know, start working on them now rather than wait 3 weeks when you get the title search back. You know, and it's important for buyers to understand, you know, most contracts come with a provision that, you know, the house is clear of violations, but you never want to be in a situation where you spent all this time getting your loan, doing all this, you know, work to get to closing, and then there's a violation there, because then it puts, you know, sometimes a bank will not let you close with a violation.
Yep.
Or sometimes even if they do, you know, the question is it something you want to deal with? And, you know, for most people, especially first-time home buyers, you know, it's just another extra thing on top of everything else.
Yep. So attorneys can always, the title search usually comes up all the violation, you know, attorneys usually gets to find all the violation. Nothing is, nothing is not, sometimes people feel like, oh, they're going to buy something, people going to, dishonesty in that industry.
Right.
You know how to.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you know, every title company does their searches.
Yep.
So, you know.
And they provide the title insurance as well.
Correct. Now, title insurance insures against like liens and ownership.
Okay.
It doesn't always insure against violations because, you know, depending on the type of violation, some violations carry a monetary fine. So title will insure against that lien, but not necessarily the violation.
Okay.
But the point is to use, you know, reputable people so you know that they're being honest, they're doing what they're supposed to. And typically it's really not in a title company's interest to be dishonest.
Yep.
You know, but sometimes I get, you know, supposed mistakes can happen. But the more eyes you have looking at it, the better chance you have of someone catching a mistake if it happens. It's pretty rare.
Got it. Great to know all that. And about the contract deposit, how much it's always like every time buyers get to buy a property, they have to put a certain amount of contract deposit. Why is that, and how much usually we go on the contract deposit?
So the whole idea of the down payment or the deposit is to tie the parties together. So let's say you had a contract with no down payment. There's nothing to stop a purchaser or a buyer from walking away from the deal. There's no penalty. So really, the deposit is like an inducement to the seller to sign the contract because they know that the buyer's serious and not going to walk away from the deal. Okay. As far as, you know, the amount of deposit, you know, again, it depends. You know, some people want 10%, some people want 5%. Sometimes it'll be a fixed number like 10,000, 20,000. You know, it's all relatively negotiable. A lot of it will depend on, you know, also the type of mortgage you may be getting.
Yep.
Or if you're buying a co-op, sometimes they have rules about, you know, how much they want to see down. So again, you know, from a seller perspective, you want to have enough money there that, you know, the buyer's not going to just up and walk away from the contract because you took the property off the market for a while and you passed on potential buyers and it's more time. So you want to know that the person's serious and going forward.
So what's the biggest misconception about your industry as an attorney? Like,
I would say probably the biggest misconception is a lot of people watch these GTV shows, and they think buying a house is like that. And in New York, it's very different than everywhere else in the country. You know, like
True.
states like Florida or California, you know, they don't really even have attorneys that do real estate. It's all title companies and escrow and things like that. You know, New York is very different, and things here, for whatever reason, are more complicated, take
Yep.
longer, but from what I understand, also result in less lawsuits and disputes between people. So, you know, you watch those shows and you think, oh, I like this house, I'm going to close on it in 3 weeks, and, you know, that's how it works. Yeah, no, unfortunately,
not
it doesn't
here.
happen like that in New York.
Yep. And New York contract, I see like when you guys send that contract, you say how many, it's usually a long contract versus like we do Connecticut deals. It's really small, 2 pages contract sent out or other deals. Regular realtor does it, but
Well,
New York we can't really.
so in New York, there are form contracts. So every attorney, you know, will do a form contract, and they put their sort of spin on it with their rider. And then when the buyer's attorney makes changes, he puts his rider on it. So like we don't go back and cross out and retype. No, you can actually look at a contract, and if you know how to read it, you can see how one thing changed from A to B to C. You know, in Connecticut, depending on where you are, you know, sometimes the agents do the contracts, but sometimes depending on what part of the state you are, sometimes the attorneys do the contract.
Like Stanford, I think attorneys does it.
Yeah.
Some other
Yeah,
Greenwich.
it's kind of funny how that works.
They're like kind of VIP.
Yeah, well, even in New York State, if you went like far upstate, they do things you know, somewhat differently as well.
Yeah.
Like if you were buying a house in, I don't know, Buffalo or something.
Yeah, they
it's
do
a
it.
little it's a little bit different than how it is down here. Even though all the same laws are supposed to apply, the practice is different.
Yep, but I feel like it's much better here because all these scams, lawsuit, it really protects from the client everything. Because over there we talking about small money like how 100, 200,000, but here you buying people buying $1 million thing. They gotta have a professional working with them about because realtors we are like kind of busy with the showing houses, all that, then the contract. But having an attorney explaining all the taking care of all that legal side, it really helps.
Yeah, I mean, you know, all these New York State contracts have a lot of legal implications one way or the other. You know, and also, you know, when you're dealing with New York City, Westchester, there's a lot of like rules and bureaucracy. Whereas maybe if you're upstate New York or out in rural Connecticut, you know, there's not as much going on there. So like, you know, New York City has so many different types of departments and violations and rules and things you can and can't do. You know, and, you know, like, for instance, co-ops. I mean, co-ops are, for the most part, a New York thing. I mean, yeah, there are co-ops in other states, but it's not quite the same. So, you know, that's like a whole industry unto itself. So, yeah, the whole idea of the attorney practice is just another set of professionalized with, you know, legal training to understand what the implications are.
Yep. And can you tell us a story about like I know you're doing almost like 22, 23 years, right?
Yeah, the 21. Don't make me older than I am, right?
No, you look young. So 21 years. So like, have you have any story like I know all the deals go crazy. Like, what's the like craziest deal you have ever done? How did you overcome it? What's the situation?
I mean, you know, there's always every deal is different, and
Yep.
and there's always kind of craziness in everything.
Every deal, yep.
You know, sometimes you get just one party that's just really kind of off the wall and unreasonable, and people just don't want to deal with them, and you kind of got to step in and be professional and work it out. Sometimes you have deals that are crazy, just even if the people are all, you know, nice and well adjusted. I had a closing recently where, you know, we were selling a house and there was just every possible title issue that there could possibly be showed up. You know, there's a mortgage in foreclosure, violations, you know, no permit for a deck. There's, you know, and then we were going to closing. We found out the second mortgage went into foreclosure. And we didn't know. So, you know, you know, like I said before, it's not an adversarial process. So everybody works together. You can come up with solutions that work. So, you know, that one was just challenging just given the number of issues, but, you know, everybody was reasonable and understanding and worked together to make it close and everyone got what they wanted.
Yep.
You know, where you run into problems is when you're dealing with someone who's just
Was not understanding.
right. I mean, I've seen people at a closing table on $1 million house fight over a $200 credit, which is, you know, when you think about it, makes no sense. You know, and sometimes people just get, you know, so frustrated that they just become unreasonable, and that's at the point,
Like they
as
get
an
stubborn, like they don't want to lose. Like you
yeah.
gotta all the parties gotta come in a point that we are here. Everyone gotta come in the middle. Like nobody wants. Sometimes people want too much. They're not sacrificing.
Yeah,
And they always get the opinion from the other people
yeah, that's the
instead
other
of the
thing.
getting from the professional.
Oh, I talked to my uncle or my
Yep.
cousin, and the thing about it too is that, in New York, over time, like you said, I've been doing this about 21 years. The way we did things in 2004 is different than the way we do things now. So your family member or friend, whatever, if they bought back then, their experience is going to be different than yours, and you can't always equate the two together. And that's sometimes that's a hard thing to overcome because people just, especially people who are going through it for the first time or, don't have as much background in it, they're more apt to listen to their family member, whoever's whispering in their ear. But that's why you hire professionals to guide you through the process who do deal with this every day.
Right. And what as an attorney, like what do you guys really want from a realtor to do? Like basically, like what are the things realtor can do to help the process make it much smoother?
Well, the first thing again is just communication.
Communication.
Communication is key. So, typically when someone buys or even sells a house, the realtor is their first person that they hire.
Yep.
So what their expectations are, what they're looking for, what their scenarios are. So sometimes clients don't always give the attorneys that information because we're always under the pressure. We got to get the contract signed. We're going to lock down the deal. So we're dealing more with the legal aspects of it. But, sometimes there's practical considerations.
All the story behind.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's as simple as, hey, I want to close on X and X date because, I need my kid to finish school for the school year.
Yeah.
Or I need to get it closed because I need to register my child for the school year. Or, things like that. Oh, I'm going away. Oh, yeah, I told the agent. Well, you didn't tell me, So the more communication, the better. And usually by the time that a client has gotten back to me, they've already had to establish a relationship with the realtor where they like them and trust them. So they're meeting me for the first time. They already know you. So there's always a level of trust there that they have that I've yet to build with them.
Makes sense. And for the audience, like what are the services? Real estate is a broad industry. Like what are the services you offer? If somebody wants to reach you out, you can tell them like what are the services you offer.
Sure. So my practice focused primarily on real estate. Most of my clientele are just regular people buying and selling homes. We deal with co-ops, condos, private homes, commercial real estate as well. But I would say that's my bread and butter is just, regular everyday people buying, selling homes.
Okay.
And that, we, from contract to closing. And, even after that, sometimes we get questions about, oh, what do I need to do with this or that? We're always happy to help our clients, succeed because it's not just about getting them in the house. It's about helping them stay there.
Yep. And you serve in the Bronx, all the New York City,
Bronx, New York City, Westchester, Rockland, even Orange County, Dutchess County, Putnam. That's pretty much where our areas are.
And what would your phone number if they want to reach you out or your office phone number?
Sure. So our office phone number is 845-739-43. Oh, excuse me. You know what? Said it wrong. You see. 845-739-4378.
Okay, got it. So, hey guys, if any of you need real estate help, buying houses, selling houses, or refinance, sometimes you need an attorney, feel free to reach out to Sergio Cavali. I've been working with him. It's such a great attorney and great communication skill.
Other than forgetting the phone number to my office.
Yep, below his number, and I'll put his info to his office address and phone number. If you guys want to reach him out, feel free to call him directly, or you can call me. I'll post his information. And thank you, Sergio, for coming. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was a very enjoyable experience.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mom.
Thank you.